Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Leah personally for organizing this. She did a phenomenal job. And Teresa and all of the environmental groups that came to represent. I think that's fantastic to drive that long way in the early wee hours of the morning to be here to talk about Ohio and our future, and we want to protect our children, and as we discussed earlier, our vulnerable populations. So I am an environmental health scientist, and I'm going to share this talk. I have the opportunity to share the stage with one of our recent MPH graduates, which I'm excited to introduce in a moment. But I wanted to give a brief overview. What does environmental public health mean? We look at the hazards, and we heard a very good overview this morning from Raina. We look at the hazards from well injection, the silica, the Ds, all these potential chemicals that we could be exposed to. And then how can an individual become exposed? Because ultimately, we're looking at public health risk, right? Protecting our future, which is our own selves. I think Ohio Department of Natural Resources is forgetting the most important natural resource we have, which is the public, the community members, the people who live in Ohio. It's not just about jobs, it's about our health. So we look at our water, we look at our air, we want to know how close are these facilities to our public schools, private schools, schools in general, where kids spend all day. How close are they to residences? So this is like the scenario that we look at in what we do. The NIEHS, which is the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, it falls under NIH, and they published a paper. We have this working group. It's a fracking working group, and we all came together as a center, as different centers across the United States, and said this is of concern. So not only is Ohio concerned, but all over the U.S. there are centers of bright minds who have concern about fracking. And they said, we don't have data. We need more data. We need more research on water contamination, research on air pollution, epidemiology, which means how does it affect people? Are they exposed? And then what are those effects? We needed this information. And then one of the key parts, which I love this component, is to involve the community throughout the whole process. We needed to know the views from the field. What are the people who are experiencing this saying? So I believe this firmly, that community must be involved and engaged in environmental health research throughout the entire process. And this was an invited chapter for our Department of Defense book on air hazards, and this was following deployment. You know, they have the burn pits in Afghanistan. Well, this was a chapter I wrote talking about how they could engage the active military and veterans to explore their exposure. So now we're using this in fracking communities to better understand what their exposures are, but getting them involved in the process. Community needs to be involved in identifying the research question. And we know scientists we're in our ivory towers, so to speak. The community members are on the ground, experiencing it, breathing, living their lives, and they need to be a part of the entire research process, along with public health decision makers and our MDs, our healthcare providers, along with our scientists. I wanted to give you a little segue into what we're planning. We just got a notice of a small internal grant award through the NIEHS center that we have. Here's just a map of the fracking, and you can imagine all of the waste that's generated, and it was touched on today. These are all the Class 2 brine injection wells, and the community has come with the question, and I want to thank Felicia and Roxanne. These are great questions. What does this waste comes into our wells? What is it getting into our water? Is that resulting in air emissions? So we put forth a small proposal working with Leah. This is going to be awesome, and we were funded some of the cash that we asked for. But we know that this waste, there's research out there. We know there's the chemicals in there has known developmental and reproductive toxicants. And 85% of it is disposed, the ODNR website says safely, is disposed by injection back down into the ground. And 2% of this waste is used for salt, because they call it brine, and put it on our roadways to melt the ice. So we are very excited to start because, and this is a view of the brine wells. These are the waste injection wells are in red, and this is our Washington County down in Marietta. And just showing, I think it's good to see a visual of the drinking water wells. These are water wells in Ohio, the blue dots. Just shows proximity and then the amount of potential contamination and human exposure. So what we're planning to do is to help the community, give them the tools so that they can monitor their water on a regular basis, looking for conductivity, pH, chemicals that may be associated. And then if there is a spike, if there is we do see high conductivity, high salt content, then we would send samples off for further analysis. And also evaluate air quality with a special emphasis near elementary schools, because some of these injection wells are very, very close to elementary schools. So I think in summary, to wrap it up, Ohio needs to protect its natural resources, including its people, number one, its water, air, and wildlife. And a health impact assessment has been a wonderful tool used by health departments in other states. Colorado has conducted several of these that included air sampling, water sampling. I have yet to see that done in Ohio from a legislative point of view, and I think that should happen. And it should also include environmental public health experts. Community members need to be involved, and we need to be actively monitoring our wells and our water continuously to check for potential contamination, and then human health. So it's been a pleasure to be here, and I thank you again, Leah, for inviting us, and we look forward to continue working with you.